Lisa Green is a lawyer and legal analyst. After earning her law degree at New York University, she was a litigator in private practice before joining NBC News, first as a lawyer and then as a senior producer for Weekend Today, and as an NBC News legal analyst. Lisa continues to make on-air appearances for NBC News and MSNBC and has written and blogged about legal issues for them both and published articles in Barron's, the National Law Journal, and the Wall Street Journal. She lives in New York City, where she serves as communications director for a major New York law firm and is the mother of two young adults. Well, welcome, Lisa. How are you today?
Good morning. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And I have to tell you, you just look too young to have two young adults. I mean, you must have started very young. That's all I can say.
I appreciate that. You know what? They're good kids, so they
Well,
didn't age
that's
me
the most
too much.
important thing. That's the
Yeah.
important thing. Well, this book was fascinating because it's called On Your Case, a comprehensive, compassionate, and only slightly bossy legal guide for every stage of a woman's life. And as I went through it, I had to say that's really, really true. I mean, it's just amazing. So, first of all, what led you to write this? I guess that's the most important thing.
Well, thank you for the praise of the book, and I hope the title gives readers a sense of what they can expect. I really meant it to be an equivalent of The Joy of Cooking, but for law. And what I mean by that is you can read it cover to cover. I won't object. But if you want to dip in from time to time for sort of a best practice when you're facing a problem, the book is there for you. And I wrote it because it seemed to me that just about every other area of a woman's life, whether it was child raising, financial planning, certainly style and physical activity was well covered, and plenty of experts were out there telling us what we needed to know. But when it comes to law, there seems to be a gap, and I'm not sure if that's because people are intimidated by the law, because, it's Latin, and there are lots of big words, or they just somehow are hoping to avoid legal issues for the entirety of their lives. But certainly that is not something we get to choose. And I wrote the book as really a girlfriend's guide to some of the issues you can expect to see in the course of your busy life as a mother, a wife, a daughter, and some ideas, beginning ideas about how to deal with them in a practical way, and maybe even get ahead of the curve so that things don't fester into crises. You have a game plan in place to plan and make things better.
Well, I tell you, you go into so many different areas, but I have to tell you what I was attracted to, because it's funny because in here you say, I'm sorry to admit I'm not a pet person, but I have to tell you, I am a pet person. I mean, as my kids were growing up, I had 5 dogs, 3 cats, and 3 kids. So it was always a zoo. Yes, in fact, you may hear my cat. She's been in here already twice since I've gotten on the line with you, and I have 2 cats and a dog now, and they certainly keep me busy. But you've got a section in here on fighting over Fido, the pain of pet custody disputes, and it must be a significant issue because you devote time to it. So tell us a little bit about that and some of the things you might have found when you did your research on this.
Yeah, I mean, my own personal growth toward pets aside, for many people, pets really are beloved members of the family, of course, and lots of couples starting out choose to bring home a pet together. Sometimes it's a little bit of a rehearsal for a child. Other times the pet on her own or on his own serves as a beloved member of the family. And then when there's a split, there's a legal problem if the couple can't agree about what to do with their pet, because while we think of pets as I say, loved, cared for companions, the law thinks of pets as something closer to property, more like a sofa than, the adorable, warm, loving thing you come home to. So courts will try to rest with a very difficult issue, which is to say, like, which member of the couple should keep the pet? And what people resort to doing, because it's really all you can do, is collect receipts, identify themselves as the person who takes the pet to the vet, the person who purchased the pet, the person who made sure inoculations were up to date, walked the dog, fed the dog. And these are, nasty, difficult to solve problems. I don't think pets like moving from place to place too much, so shared custody can be a problem too. But all this by way of saying I think people need to be prepared to understand that the law has a way to go in catching up to how owners understand their pets as against how the courts do. It is a little different than typical child custody issues. Maybe it shouldn't be.
Wow. Well, you've given some interesting examples in here, and I find it fascinating the celebrity examples that you give. But you also have something that's very, very near and dear, I think, to at least my audience, and that's managing mom, dad, and other older loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a responsibility. One of the main issues, because I work a lot with women who are 50 plus, and one of their big, big issues is elder care.
Yeah.
And I found, especially with women, even though it may be the husband's parents, the wife really is the one responsible. I mean, she seems to do all the research and what needs to be done and does the running around and so forth. So, what happens in the managing mom, dad, and the other older loved ones? What are the things that people need to look out for? And also, how do you really know when you're making the right decisions? And what do you do when you put them in a facility and it's not what you think it would be? I mean, what are some of the suggestions you have there?
I'm really glad you raised that, and it is increasingly a challenge for lots of women. I agree with you that more often than not, even in 2015, women are bearing the brunt of caring for parents and caring for kids at the same time, sandwich generation issues. And I don't know that people understand what they're getting into, and it is complicated. My own mother, who has dementia, is sort of providing me with an on-the-job learning experience, and so let me share with you some of the things I learned in the book and have learned dealing with her situation as well. And I guess the most important thing I would say is face reality. If you can have an honest conversation with your parents and make sure they have key documents, a will is really important, but also if they're ready, if they can identify someone and give them what's called power of attorney. You don't have to choose an attorney to give them power of attorney. You want someone you trust to have the authority in case they need it to make financial decisions for you. My mother signed a power of attorney, and now in her condition, it is unbelievably convenient and helpful to her that I can sign checks for her and pay bills and make some medical decisions through a similar document that's called a healthcare proxy. So I think, candor and certainly, opening a bottle of wine and talking with parents, saying, I've read about this in the newspaper and I think we should talk about it. However you can get that conversation started, if you get along with your family members, I would urge everyone to pre-plan. The second thing I would say is I don't know that there's a lot of leeway when it comes to facilities in terms of negotiating for the best possible situation other than being there and being a loud advocate. But what people definitely can do is use resources. I list some of them in the book, including government websites, so they can be informed consumers if they're moving a loved one to a care facility, whether it's independent living, assisted living, or a nursing home. There is data out there. It is free often to get, and that means you can do the work yourself if you have a little bit of time. And it's the kind of research that it seems to me pays off later. You want to be an informed consumer. These are really, really fraught emotional issues. And something else I talk about in the book, happens all the time, is how these events, which are so sad, really do spark family wars. And that can range, this, from fighting over an heirloom that an elderly person didn't specify its recipient, and everyone fights over, the cake slicer or the, seemingly worthless lace doily that was on a nightstand because it has emotional significance. Again, urging people to make those decisions in a will, share their thinking about it. Don't keep it a secret. Surprise everyone afterwards. These are not fun discussions, but it's a gift that family members can give each other, the planning and the transparency. Because without it, people really devolve into their childish selves, and lots of fighting, lots of spending of money on lawyers, and to what end, you know? So that's sort of an outline of some of the things I think people should be thinking about. And if it's tough to think about, just remember that you're going to save yourself a lot of grief down the road, potentially, if you do a little planning up front.
Well, one of the things that you said I think is so important, and that is if you trust someone. That is the key issue when you have someone who is kind of running your estate or making decisions for you. Who do you really trust? And in the case of family members, sometimes it's not the one you would think. In other words,
Yep.
maybe you think of, oh, I should go with the older person and then the older child, let's put it like that. And then
Hmm.
some people say, well, but this one is the one that's always, taking care of me and been there for
Yep.
me and so forth. And then there are people who really don't have children and they've really got to go to a trusted friend. And so there's so many different issues. And I think that issue of trust itself is a big one to decide on. And people change, circumstances change, and I think that's a big area. And I was very fortunate with my mom. My sister and I are very close, even though we live
Mm.
totally in different places. But where we just like we just done one of the things we did in the end was help support my mom for the last 10 years, and
Mm.
she said, well, you've never asked for an accounting. And I said, well, I don't need one. I said, if you tell me
Yeah.
this is what I need to send you for a check, that's what I send you. I mean, I would never even have thought to question
Mm.
her. And yet I know there are people who argue over $5 and $10. And so when it came to dividing up my mom's things, my niece had put a claim on her silver, and my sister said, well, I know you don't want to clean it anyway. And and there were things like that. But as far as her personal possessions, she said, look, she said, I know you love jewelry and I know you love some of the things she wore. So you go in, you decide what you want to take that is jewelry or clothing, and then the rest of us will decide what else we want. And so we had no arguments.
Yeah.
And it's, I guess, very unusual in some families. But that brings me to something else, and that's this issue that you write about making babies. Uh, I mean, there are even soap operas today that are attacking this situation, and with surrogacy and sperm
Hmm.
donors and
Hmm.
uh, adoption and all of these things, and especially now, I think surrogacy is a big thing. What is your experience with this, or your position on it?
Yeah, it's such a beautiful event. Wanting to have a child, bringing home a child, and raising one to be, straight and strong, and yet, and I mean straight up, in good behavior, not necessarily straight or gay, because what a wonderful world now where those barriers are falling and people can have same-sex relationships, bring home children together without some of the, I think, unfair barriers for that. But that semantic aside, what I want to say is, given the range of options now available to would-be parents, often they do involve lawyering, and that may seem antithetical, but it really isn't. For example, with egg donors, there's now a major controversy underway. I think it's appropriate to see if there really should be a cap on the amount of money people pay women for donor eggs. There's sort of a guidance that says $10,000 is the ceiling, but really, who invented that number? And is that a fair number to the women who are surrogates? And the minute you start thinking about these issues, you realize that there's a multiplicity of parents or would-be parents involved in surrogacy. The donor, the carrier, the would-be parent, the partner of the would-be parent, maybe another donor if there's sperm and egg donors. It gets really crowded at birthday time if a child has that many parents. And what parents, would-be parents in those situations, and adoptions too, need to do, get a lawyer who's experienced in those areas. States have different rules, and the consequences for not knowing them can be catastrophic. If there's a custody fight over a newborn with multiple parents or potential multiple parents, that is going to be just a nightmare given all the work one already needs to do bringing a child up, right? So again, this is where the law, if deployed early, can save problems later. And if I can do nothing else with this book than get people or women thinking about the law as a time saver, if you confront it early on, then my work is done. Because this issue, this new world we live in of alternative child raising arrangements, is complicated. Lawyers can help make it easier. You can't really go it alone.
Yeah, it's really an amazing